What's up, everybody? John Morris here, johnmorrisonline.com. Welcome back to another episode of the John Morris Show. This episode, we're going to continue in our e-commerce script. This is a snippet from lesson 2, and what you're going to see in this is really the heart of the script, in my opinion, because it's what's going to allow our templating system to work. Is what's going to allow us to be able to query the right products from our database and display them properly on the page. This is really kind of the core of everything that we're going to be doing. And so what you're going to learn is you're going to learn first how to do some URL rewriting. So for example, if you're familiar with WordPress, you may know that when you turn on pretty permalinks, you go to a blog post page, and in the URL, what you'll see is a slug, to be like a phrase with dash. It'll be like the title dashed out or whatever, or if a category page or whatever. So you may have seen something like that, and there's a way that is accomplished, and URL rewriting is a part of that. So in reality, you're not actually on a page that's been created that has those dashes. You're on the index.php page of WordPress, but the URL rewriting makes it look so you're on that page, etc. And then the second part of it is a handler that you write so that when someone visits a URL like that, even though you're on the index.php page, you're actually going to see the content for what looks like that particular blog post page. So that's the same thing we're doing here. So you're going to see how we do the URL rewriting and then how we write the handler to deal with the different URLs that someone may try to visit on our site, and how to differentiate between what's a legit, say, product page or admin page or home page versus what is a page that we should be throwing a 404 for. So again, this is really the heart of the entire kind of system here that you're going to get a chance to see. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the video. So if we type in, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to emulate what would be a product SKU, because again, this is how we're going to handle our URLs here, is using product SKUs. Now for a CMS, you might do, this would be maybe the slug of the title of the post. You could do it a number of different ways. Here we're just going with product SKUs. So you can see now I'm getting the SKU number and I'm getting single, so that's different from what we had on the home page. And then if we go to about, like this, we're getting about and page. And then if we go to something like, let's just make up something that doesn't exist. Let's go to, like, say, horse/about. We're getting a 404. Okay, so that's what we are after. Being able to, you notice we're not doing about.php. We're not doing, p = 9. We're using user-friendly URLs, but we're getting different feedback based off of what type of URL they're going to go through. And so again, the URL rewriting and the handler is what makes this happen. So let's talk about the URL rewriting first. So this is going to be in your htaccess file, and it's actually really simple. So we're going to be using mod rewrite. So if that's not on your server, you just want to make sure that's enabled. I would guess most it's going to be, and if it's not, it's easy to turn on. But then we're going to use this to fire up our rewrite engine, and that's what this first line does. And then we're doing two conditions here. So one is for directory names that already exist. So for example, our includes folder. If you go to the includes folder, we're not going to apply the rewriting to that, okay? Because we don't want to. That can mess up things like images, and when we get in later, CS files and JavaScript, and it's just really not necessary. Okay, we'll do some other stuff to deal with making sure people can't access those folders and stuff. But if they already exist, if it already exists on our file system, we're going to ignore it. Same with any existing file. So if we went to like includes and then db.php, we're going to ignore those files as well. I could see someone asking, well, why not just ignore those? Again, when we get into JavaScript and CSS files, it's going to be a problem. And then if you try to parse it where, we will redirect PHP, it just gets really convoluted. And there's really no reason to, because if someone visits this db.php in a browser, it's just going to be a blank page anyway. So it's not like they're going to be able to see your PHP code. All right, so again, we just need to exclude existing directories and existing files from our rewriting. After that, then our one rewrite rule here is going to be basically any other URL. We're going to redirect them to index.php, but we're not going to show the index.php part. So you can see here, if we go to about, we stay on about, we don't actually show them index.php, but the page that they are actually on here is index.php. So that's how the rewriting works. And this is something that you would see in a lot of different WordPress and some of their systems out there when they talk about permalinks. This is what they do. From there, then we need our handler. And so since they're going to index.php, we're going to write our handler in index.php. And that's basically what our index.php is going to be, is our handler. Right? We're going to use template files to display product pages versus a home page versus admin pages, etc. So we don't need to put all of that in index.php. All we need is our handler. And what the handler needs to do is figure out, well, what were they trying to access? So if it's something like about, we need to know that, okay, they're trying to access an admin page and they are trying to access the about admin page, and we need to display the appropriate content. Or if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like this, we are going to say, okay, they're trying to access a product page, and this is the product they're trying to access. If it's just blank like this, then we assume they're going to access the home page, so we need to display the home page. And if it's something we can't figure out, then it doesn't fall into these defined rules, then for now we're going to throw a 404 page, because we don't know what they're trying to get after. And of course, the one thing about this is, as you go along, you will find that you may need to tweak this a little bit for different situations where it makes sense that, oh, now I do know what this particular URL was trying to find, and I can adjust my code a little bit. But this is going to give you a nice base to work from and actually just make kind of all this work from the beginning. All right, so how do we do that? Well, there's a couple things that we need to do. Now, there's enough code in doing the initial parsing that I felt it warranted a function. And so I created a functions file in the includes folder. You can see that right here. And of course, in the load.php, I now include that functions file. So again, this is the nice thing about this loading file here, is all I have to do is require load in this file, and it's going to load all of this stuff that I need. So as we build our application, we'll have more and more stuff here. I don't have to change this up here. All I have to do is change this load.php. So I'm going to X this out so it makes it a little bit easier to find the pages that I'm after. All right, so in our functions file here, we have this new function called get page identifier from URL. Pretty, I think, self-explanatory about what we're trying to do. We're trying to get what type of page and what page we're after from the URL that the person visited. So there's a number of things that go into this. First off, you're going to notice we have this abs path constant in here, which we didn't have in our config file before. So you can see now I have abs path and file, and that's going to give us the absolute path to our config file, which is in our root folder. We can kind of use that for what we need in terms of an absolute path. You know, that some people may scoff at that a little bit. You could hard code this in here if you feel like you need to, or hard code the absolute path. That's something that, for example, WordPress does when it does its install script. It hard codes the absolute path in here. You can certainly do that, but this works for what we're after here. So I'm fine with that. All right, so what we're doing here, so this can be a little difficult to kind of get your mind around, but essentially what we're after from kind of this part right here is we want to know what all comes after this /e-commerce/ right here. Because this is the root folder. Remember, we're in our e-commerce folder here. So this is the root folder of our application. So to figure out if they're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or if they're on about, we don't really need all of this here. We know what that is. We don't need to worry about that. We want this part right here. Now, getting that in a consistent way that you can actually work with and deal with some of the different variations is actually a little bit more difficult than you might think. So that's why we have some of this code in here. So essentially what we're doing here is we're starting with the server request URI, and we're going to do a string replace on this. So the server request URI is going to give us /ecommerce/about. That's what, if you echoed this, that's what you would get from this. Well, we don't need this e-commerce part. We just need the about part. And so we're going to do a string replace and essentially take out this e-commerce part. Now, again, to do that, it takes a little bit here. So of course we could hard code it, but then again, anything that may come before that, there's just different scenarios that you want to deal with here. And so what we're doing is we're doing the directory name of our absolute path. So our absolute path is going to be like home/Ubuntu / I think it might be e-commerce/config.php as an example. So it's going to be this full long path to the actual config file. Well, we don't need the whole thing. All we need is the final directory name. We need this e-commerce directory name. That's what dir name is going to start to give us. So what it's going to do by doing dir name, we're essentially stripping off the config.php. So now it's going to be home Ubuntu e-commerce. That's going to be what dir name gives us. And then base name is going to strip off the front part of it. So it's going to strip off the home Ubuntu part, and it's going to leave us with e-commerce. And so that essentially leaves us with this e-commerce part that we need. Now, again, you could, like I said, you could just kind of hard code this, but depending on where you install it, and I'm not assuming that you're going to necessarily use this e-commerce folder, you will likely take out all this out of that folder and maybe put it in the root of a domain. So then that could all change. And so we just want to have as consistent a way of possible as we can of getting just this about part right here. And so that's essentially what this is doing right here. From that, what we end up with is essentially a string that's going to be like //about because of the way that it works. And so then from there, we just need to parse that out and deal with it. So if we just come here and I'll just show you print r and then to do request. So this is going to show you what this looks like after we've done all of this stripping out. And so we're getting essentially // in here because it's home, that's all we're getting. But if we go to say about, we're going to get // about. Again, ignore this part right here. That comes from something else. So // about is what this turns into. Well, now we could just get rid of the slashes, but we don't know. There could be 5 slashes. There could be 2 slashes. There could be 1. We don't know. So we have to deal with this in a way that is consistent. So the way that we do that is to split this by the slashes. And so if we move this down and we print out our parts variable now, and the split function is basically going to take a string, split it by the delimiter, which is this, the delimiter, and put the different elements into an array. Okay, so if we refresh, what we're going to get is an array. And because we had // right, it's splitting it by the slashes, but there's nothing in between those slashes. So these first 2 elements are basically blank, and then we have about. Okay, now if we did something like, this is what I mean by, someone could type in something like this. Well, now, if we were to just trying to, this is not a real URL, so we need to be able to know that and deal with it and understand that. That's why we can't just hard code some of this or just reference array elements. We need to do it the way that we're doing it so that we can handle with all this stuff. This is not a legit URL, whereas this is. But if we just pop this off the end of here, this about, if we just grab this about here, or we tried to reference this number 2, it could throw things all off. So again, we just need a consistent way. So we split it like this so that we now have it all split up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to loop through this array. And we are going to first check to see if any of these elements are empty. So we're doing a for each, and then we're looping through the parts array, and we're putting the keys and the values into the variable key and value for the purposes of this loop. And then we're going to check the value to see if it's empty. So in this case, the elements at 0 and 1 are both empty. And if they're empty, we're going to unset them because we don't need them. They don't matter. They're just there. We don't need anything to do with them. So we're just going to unset them so we can get rid of that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check and see if what we have left is greater than 1. So for a standard, again, we have to always make assumptions. So for a standard URL, the URLs that we want to handle and deal with, that we want our site visitors going to, there's only should be one element in the array. It should be about. The only way there would be one more element in the array is if you had, again, something like this. Right? So now if we strip away the empty ones, we still have horse and we still have about. So we would have two elements in the array, but this is not a legit URL. It's not a URL we're going to support. So we want to make sure that we can deal with the differences between these two things. And so that's what this line does. If we strip out all the empty stuff and we count how many elements in the array and it's greater than 1, that's not a legit URL. So we don't want to handle it, and so we just immediately return false. So this function will return false there. Okay, and then we'll deal with how we're going to deal with that later in just a second. However, if of course we don't return false, then we'll continue processing, and at that point we can assume that we have an array and it has one element in it, and that element is this last piece of the URL right here. So now we can start to do something with it. And so we just use array pop. Array pop's just going to pop it off the end, and it's going to give us what that value is. So this is essentially going to give us about, in this context, it's going to give us about in a string as our identifier. If we were over here, it's going to, if we were at, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's going to give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as our string. Now, if it's empty, right, because if we're at our home page, if it's empty, then we know that we're at the home page. If we popped off all the empty stuff and there's nothing left, then that's because we are at our home page. So we need to set this identifier here and return home because of the way that we do the checks on our index page. Okay, so this basically gives us what we need from our URL. What it's going to return is it's going to return home, the string home, or the string about, or a digit that represents the SKU number for our product, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or it's going to give us false, which means that the URL that they were trying to access is not legit. So now we've taken the wild, wild west of this URL, and we have something we can now build our application on top of that's semi-reliable. Now, again, I'm not saying this is necessarily going to account for every situation you could ever encounter, and it's something that as you work with this and encounter more situations, you may need to update and tweak, but this is going to give you a good foundation to work from. All right, so that's that one function, get page identifier from URL. And then if we come over here, you can see we're now setting our variable identifier equal to whatever we get from there. So again, false, home, about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. That's what this is going to be equal to. All right, so as I mentioned in the lesson, this isn't necessarily the only way that you can accomplish this. This is something that I had to research because it's not something that I've had to really do all of that much. And so when I have my own way of doing things, but whenever I teach these lessons, I of course always want to go out and do some research and see if there's other ways that people are doing this that maybe make more sense. And when the research on this in particular, I saw a bunch of different ways that people do it. And so there's probably a number of different ways. The thing here is for you to start with something and then develop it from there. Okay, so hopefully what this is going to give you is that foundation that you can start from. And then as you start to use this system and see different stuff and, have people actually visiting the site and get feedback and so forth, then you can start to tweak and advance and make it better and all these sorts of things. So again, hopefully you got something out of that. Again, this is just a snippet of lesson 2. If you'd like the full video along with the source code and all the other videos that are going to be in this tutorial series, along with my full PHP 101 course, my bonus interview with Michael Phoenix. If you want all that and want to get it for $10 off the regular price, just go to johnmorrisonline.com/deal and you can do that. All right, that'll do it for this episode. Again, thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you like the video, subscribe if you haven't, and we'll talk to you next time.